Angel Reese, though. What I found most interesting about this list is where ESPN ranks their face of the league. Unfortunately for Angel Reese, the polish seems to be melting off the turd. ESPN has tried to convince us that Angel Reese is the face of the WNBA. Not only is the matriarch of Me-Bounds the face of the league, according to the media, Angel Reese is the most dominant basketball player in the world.
The story of Angel Reese was supposed to be straightforward. A breakout star, a media favorite, a rapid climb to superstardom that felt almost guaranteed. That was the narrative. Clean, simple, and already written. But then ESPN released a ranking that quietly disrupted everything. Almost overnight, the conversation started to shift. One moment, she was being positioned as the future face of the WNBA. The next, she was placed in a spot that left fans doing a double take, questioning how the storyline changed so fast. How does someone once framed as the league's next big centerpiece suddenly get talked about like just another name in the mix? The script didn't just change, it got rewritten in real time.
The chance to talk about Angel Reese, Atlanta Dream debut. Of course we covered it, but I didn't make a video. You know, it's a lot of videos I didn't get a chance to make because I've been busy. But yeah, we here. So make sure y'all tap that like button, hype the video, share it, all the good things, man. My takeaways were Angel Reese fit right in. She's exactly what the Atlanta Dream needed.
Before we go any further, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. You already know you don't want to miss what's coming next, because the real shock here isn't just that ESPN dropped yet another one of those controversial rankings that immediately lit up social media again. It's that this time, something actually felt different. For the first time, the carefully built perception started to slip just enough for even casual fans to notice. The illusion didn't just get questioned, it started to crack in plain sight.
In case you're wondering, Angel Reese, still not good from the field. 3 for 7, 10 points. I mean, good God almighty. Not good. By the way, Mystics defeated the Dream. Defeated the Dream. That was ugly. No doubt about it. Speaking of ugly, let's just address this. When does lame-ass Atlanta Dream fix the lighting and change the court color?
Because when that list came out and fans immediately looked for Angel Reese, they weren't met with a top 5 superstar placement. They weren't even looking at a top 1-0 centerpiece. Instead, what they saw painted a much bigger picture, one that went far beyond any single headline or talking point could explain.
And it's not rocket science to see that since her arrival and the rest of that 2024 class, the WNBA has skyrocketed.
Finally! We have a WNBA player willing to admit that Caitlin Clark is the reason for the elevation of pretend basketball into the mainstream. Finally, we have a WNBA player willing to admit Caitlin Clark is the reason that they are no longer making minimum wage.
Here's the uncomfortable reality that's been lingering in the background for months, slowly building tension like a soda can that's been shaken too long and never opened. And the second that list dropped, everything that had been simmering finally burst into the open all at once.
Okay? Even, of course, Angel Reese, she was giving Lauren Betts the business. Okay, but Angel Reese, I see her frustration in this game. I really want Angel Reese to stop trying to shoot through defenders. She kept eating up the floor, and it was making me so upset because I'm like, I don't want her to risk any injury. She gets the ball blocked from her, from whoever, and she just boom. You just see Angel Reese just continue just repeatedly just fall on the ground, fall on her knees, fall on her lower back. Okay, that's her tailbone.
For almost 2 years, fans were led to believe that Angel Reese wasn't just a rising star, but the star, the face of the league, the centerpiece of its future, and the driving force behind a new era for the WNBA. But when a major network finally stepped in to evaluate impact, production, and overall value, that narrative suddenly didn't carry the same weight. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because if someone is truly the face of a league, it shouldn't take constant reminders to reinforce it, and it definitely doesn't make sense for them to be ranked outside the top 20 while everyone quietly hopes nobody pays attention. Then you add something even harder to ignore something that surfaced before. Any rankings were released. No analytics, no debates, no hot takes needed. Just the arena itself. The opening games, the early turnout, the empty seats staring back louder than any broadcast ever could. And when fans saw those half-filled buildings being circulated online, it raised a question that most people weren't willing to say out loud. What exactly has been sold to us, and who are we actually being told to believe in? Because while those images of sparse crowds were making the rounds, another reality was unfolding in plain sight. One that had been obvious for a while, yet consistently brushed aside. We all saw it.
The Atlanta Dream ended up besting the Chicago Sky. And I want to talk about Angel Reese's performance. Overall, in the box score, it looks like she did pretty good. 8.7 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals. But she went 2 for 7 field goal percentage, shooting 28% from the field and 4 of 8 from the free throw, 50% on free throws. All right. Angel Reese is still doing Angel Reese things as she missed wide open shots, things that she should have made, she didn't make.
We've always known this reality, but saying it out loud used to carry a cost. The moment you pointed it out, the reaction wasn't discussion, it was backlash. You were labeled everything except what you actually were, simply accurate. And yet, here we are. Because while parts of the league have struggled to consistently fill arenas, one presence has done the complete opposite, drawing attention, boosting viewership, and shifting energy in a way that stands out against everything else happening around it. That presence is Caitlin Clark. Now, this is usually where the conversation gets distorted into sides and arguments, but that's not the point. The point is acknowledging something that's become impossible to dismiss. Since Caitlin Clark entered the league, ticket demand has spiked in certain markets, and nationally televised games have turned into appointment viewing instead of background entertainment. Suddenly, the WNBA wasn't just being mentioned, it was being analyzed, debated, broken down, and most importantly, watched at a new level. That doesn't happen by coincidence, that's impact. And that's exactly why the ESPN ranking matters more than just another list. Because in theory, rankings are supposed to reflect reality, even when they spark disagreement. But what this one exposed wasn't just debate, it was a growing gap between the established narrative and what people are actually seeing unfold in real time.
That can control the paint, Angel Reese gonna do that. Angel Reese did look nervous though. She did look a little bit timid. It was kind of emotional being back in Chicago. She got a lot of love, by the way. If there's any narratives out there that Chicago don't love Angel, it's definitely not true, because the city of Chicago was still cheering for her. They gave her a standing ovation, and I think they showed a tribute. They gave her a tribute, if I'm not mistaken. I think they could have said that for the regular season, but
because when you go down that list and notice certain players placed ahead of Caitlin Clark players who don't shift attention in the same way, who don't pull the same kind of audience, who don't change the atmosphere of a game, you start to pick up on something pretty quickly. And the explanation behind it says even more. Once you strip away the polished wording and careful framing, what it really comes down to is this. Angel Reese is recognized for a very specific skill set: rebounding, hustle, effort, the kinds of plays that absolutely matter, but don't typically carry a franchise on their own. In simple terms, that's a role player profile. And that isn't meant as an insult, even if it lands that way in today's climate. The tension comes from something else entirely. Because when one player becomes the clear focal point of attention, especially in a league trying to expand its reach, it naturally creates friction, not just among fans, but within the narratives that were already in place before that player even arrived. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter that environment, she disrupted it. Not slowly, not gradually, immediately. And instead of fully adjusting to that shift, there's been a noticeable hesitation. A. Push to distribute credit evenly, to avoid placing too much weight on any single name, even when the numbers, the ratings, and the ticket demand are all pointing in one direction. But the reality is simple. Leagues grow when they have stars.
She got all kinds of ball on Angel Reese, but that wasn't even the worst one. Angel ended up getting all up in her feelings here. Oh, she gets mad. Oh, yeah, you got the shit blocked out of you. I mean, come on. Angel's mad she got her shot blocked.
Clip. Not just solid contributors, not just reliable performers, actual stars. The type of players fans will watch no matter who's on the other side, no matter the standings, no matter the context of the game. And right now, whether it's accepted or debated, Caitlin Clark has become that kind of draw for the WNBA. That doesn't shut the door on anyone else rising. It doesn't limit Angel Reese from developing into something bigger over time. But it does make one thing harder to avoid. The current hierarchy isn't nearly as complex as some narratives try to suggest. So when ESPN puts out a ranking that quietly places Angel Reese a step lower, while still not fully elevating Caitlin Clark to the level her influence seems to demand, it creates this awkward in-between space. Nobody feels fully satisfied, yet the underlying shift is still obvious. What you're really seeing is a transition, a slow, uneasy move from one storyline to another. And moments like that are rarely smooth, because it's never easy to adjust course. After investing so much into a different narrative, especially when that narrative has already been repeated, reinforced, and built up over time. But eventually, reality pushes back. Because attendance figures don't bend, viewership doesn't bend, audience behavior doesn't bend. And over time, even the strongest narratives have no choice but to align with what's actually happening. That's what this feels like. Not a collapse, not a downfall, but a correction taking shape in real time. Angel Reese isn't being pushed out of the picture. She's being reframed within it.
Get in the paint and try to put up a layup. She gets blocked, she gets a little bit of contact, she's boom, smacked down on the floor. I was getting very, very nervous for her. And the Washington Mystics with their rookies and they bench, Lauren Betts, Georgia A. Moore, she's now back in, guys. Again, last year, she got drafted by the WNBA, obviously, to the Washington Mystics. She tore her ACL, literally prior to the training camp. Or it was either prior to training camp or during the training camp, right? Georgia A. Moore tears her ACL. She's out throughout the entire season last season for the Washington Mystics.
Clip. And in some ways, that kind of shift hits harder than direct criticism, because it doesn't just challenge an opinion, it forces expectations to be recalculated in real time, under a spotlight, with millions watching every adjustment unfold. The irony is that the league itself may actually be benefiting from all of this, because a true breakout star like Caitlin Clark doesn't take value away from others. It expands the entire landscape. It creates opportunities, boosts visibility, and brings in audiences who might never have paid attention otherwise. And when you look at the empty seats in some arenas, the sharp spikes in, viewership tied to one player, and the shifting perception of others in the same breath, it becomes clear this story is still developing. At that point, the conversation stops being about whether Angel Reese was overrated or whether Caitlin Clark is underrated. The real question becomes how long it takes before people stop acting like this is still up for debate at all. Because once that pretense disappears, the discussion gets simpler, but also far more uncomfortable for those who built entire narratives on a different version of events. And that's where this situation shifts again, because it's no longer just about rankings, lists, or headlines. It becomes a question of credibility.
Big news out of the W today is Angel Reese was traded to the Atlanta Dream. Per Taylor Rooks, Chicago side traded away Angel Reese in her prime. She was a 2025 Unrivaled Champion, 2024 Rookie of the Year runner-up behind Caitlin Clark, two-time All-Star, two-time rebounding champion, averaging a career triple-double with 5.2 million Instagram followers. I think that actually does matter in the W. Also, ticket prices for the Atlanta Dream are already exploding for the 2026 home opener after the Angel Reese trade. They've surged from $38.
Clip. For months, fans were presented with a very specific narrative around Angel Reese. One that positioned her as the face of a new era, the engine behind the league's rising popularity, and the personality expected to push the WNBA further into the mainstream spotlight. But once the noise faded and the actual measures of influence started to matter, that narrative began to strain under its own weight in ways that became harder to overlook. Right now, there's a noticeable disconnect between who was promoted as the central figure and who is actually driving attention and engagement on the court. That contrast becomes even clearer when you look back at the early stretch of games, when expectations were at their highest and even the most loyal supporters were quietly forced to face a question they had been avoiding. If this is supposed to be the face of the league, then why aren't the arenas reflecting it? At the same time, games featuring Caitlin Clark tell a completely different story, one that doesn't need over-explaining or justification because the atmosphere speaks for itself. The attention feels natural, the demand feels organic, and the energy shifts the moment she steps on the floor. And that's where the tension really starts to form, because promoting multiple stars is healthy for any league. That part is normal. But it becomes something else entirely when the narrative is pushed so hard that it no longer matches what fans are actually seeing in real time.
This trade, here we'll get straight to the point. Angel Reese got traded to the Atlanta Dream today for, I use the word Tic Tacs, others use Skittles. We can talk about Kit Kats, M&Ms, Reese's Pieces, but she got traded for virtually nothing. And I said it very clearly in my video, and I'm not taking that perspective that some other people want to go with, oh, she was toxic, oh, she was this. I'm not doing that now.
At that point, it stops looking like simple promotion and starts feeling more like persuasion. And modern audiences, more than ever, are quick to reject anything that feels like it's telling them what to believe when their own eyes are showing them something different. That's exactly why this ESPN ranking landed differently. It didn't just trigger arguments. It highlighted a shift that had already been unfolding quietly in the background. A gradual acknowledgement that the original framing may have stretched too far. A subtle recalibration of roles and a more cautious step away from the idea that Angel Reese was the undisputed focal point of the league. And that's where the situation becomes interesting, because Angel Reese now finds herself in a spot many athletes eventually reach. The spotlight doesn't fade, but the story around it changes. She's no longer being treated as a finished product or a fixed label. Instead, the focus shifts toward what actually happens on the floor: performance, development, and consistency over headlines or media-driven positioning. And in a way, that might be exactly the stage she needs. Because when expectations line up with reality, growth becomes easier to track, improvement becomes clearer, and success feels like something built rather than assumed. But while that adjustment plays out individually, the broader conversation around the league keeps evolving, and it keeps returning to one simple, unavoidable truth. Every era in sports is shaped by defining figures, the kinds of players who elevate everything around them, simply by drawing attention that lifts the entire ecosystem.
Man, I don't know how I feel about it, because Angel Reese has started to become a dominant sports figure in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? Like, and Angel Reese had the Chicago, Caleb Williams was out there at the games. Like, she had also started to bring out the celebrities in Chicago. Now, to Shady's point, Atlanta is quite literally the mecca of black entertainment. right? That is where, if you're doing TV shows out there, BT headquarters is out there. Tyler Perry has a studio out there, along with living out there, and he's one of the biggest black television moguls and influencers of the culture in regards to what they're doing out there. So I do like it.
Resisting that reality doesn't create balance, it only creates confusion, because fans aren't actually unclear about what they're seeing on the court. Over time, as more games are played and more data stacks up in real time, that gap between narrative and reality starts to close, the framing adjusts, the rankings shift, and the conversation slowly moves away from what people were told should be true, and toward what is actually unfolding in front of them. And in the middle of that transition, Angel Reese finds herself at a crossroads that carries both pressure and opportunity. Because, whether it's fair or not, being overlooked has a way of sharpening a player's edge. It fuels motivation, it builds toughness, it forces adaptation. And if she leans into that shift instead of fighting against it, there's still a clear path forward for her to grow within a league that is constantly evolving. The spotlight doesn't disappear, but it does move. It gravitates toward the players, who naturally command it. And as that happens, the conversation only gets louder, as perception gives way to reality, piece by piece. And if anything has been clear from this recent stretch, it's that the audience is already starting to understand where things are headed, even if others are still trying to catch up.